Say women want good men, polite, available, predictable, but the truth is different, and it's brutal. Desire is not born from kindness. Desire is born from emotional power. While some men try to please, others dominate the game without asking permission. This video is not comfortable, it is not moral, it is not gentle. Here, you will understand why apparent cruelty attracts, why needy kindness repels, and how instinct ignores everything you were taught to believe. There is a comfortable lie repeated so many times, it became a dogma. The idea that women prefer good men, and when they choose cold, distant, or cruel men, it's because of trauma, bad luck, or confusion. This explanation is convenient. It protects morality, it protects the rejected male ego, and it avoids looking at what truly happens inside the psychology of attraction. The truth is harsher. This is not about good versus evil, it is about power, perception, instinct, emotional control. What attracts is not cruelty itself. It's what cruelty signals at deep psychological levels. The good guy who gives too much, who adapts himself, who anticipates needs, who sacrifices without being asked, sends a silent message: I need to be accepted. And neediness is psychological weakness. Public speeches about empathy, equality, and sensitivity don't change this. The female unconscious operates on a different frequency. It watches behavior, not intentions. It measures emotional stability, autonomy, the ability to set boundaries, and above all, the absence of fear of losing. The man perceived as cruel does not fear loss. He does not negotiate his value. He does not ask permission to exist. From the first interaction, attraction is a silent test, not conscious, instinctive, small delays, mood shifts, subtle challenges, light provocations. The good man tries to fix, to please, to compensate. The cold man holds his frame. He does not emotionally react to every fluctuation. That difference creates a brutal power imbalance. Who reacts, loses. Who stays centered, controls the tempo. And desire grows where there is tension, not where there is predictability. There is a classic mistake few admit: confusing kindness with lack of strength. True kindness requires power. Apparent cruelty is often just strength without a mask. The problem is that most good men are not good by conscious choice. They are good out of fear. Fear of confrontation, fear of rejection, fear of being seen as inadequate. That fear leaks out in micro-behaviors: overly long messages, too many explanations, constant availability, inability to say no. The female unconscious detects this instantly, and once detected, it cannot be unseen. The man who seems cruel is usually the man who does not explain himself. He acts and accepts the consequences. He does not try to control the image people have of him. This creates a powerful psychological paradox. If he doesn't need approval, it means he has options. If he has options, his value is high. If his value is high, he is desirable. This is not a moral equation. It is a psychological status equation. Desire is not democratic. It does not reward effort. It responds to signals. Another point few dare to say: many women do not feel safe with excessively nice men. Not physical safety, primitive emotional safety. A man who bends too much appears unstable, easily influenced, unable to hold pressure. In moments of crisis, this type of man tends to collapse. The hard, controlled man who does not emotionally fall apart sends a different message. The world can collapse around him, and he will still be standing. That image activates deep layers of instinct related to protection and survival. There is also the factor of unpredictability. The human brain associates pleasure with variation. A man who is too predictable kills desire. The man who does not reveal everything, who does not fully give himself, who keeps parts of himself inaccessible, creates a void the mind tries to fill. And where there is a void, obsession is born. The good man gives everything. The cruel man gives fragments. The female mind works to conquer what is not fully available. This is not perversity, it is basic psychology. Here comes the most uncomfortable point. Many so-called good men use kindness as a bargaining chip. They are kind expecting a return. When they don't receive it, they feel betrayed. That silent expectation turns kindness into disguised manipulation. The unconscious reads this as false. The cold man promises nothing. He does not offer emotional security in advance. He creates no debt. Paradoxically, this makes him appear more honest to instinct. So cruelty is not what attracts. What attracts is the absence of emotional submission. The ability to hold your own center without asking for validation. The willingness to lose without collapsing. The man who accepts loss as part of the game stops being a hostage to the outcome and whoever is not a hostage has power. Desire follows power the way a shadow follows a body. None of this is taught openly. In fact, it is constantly denied. Men are taught that being nice, understanding, and patient is enough. When it fails, they say the woman is broken or likes suffering. These explanations are moral shortcuts to avoid facing reality. Attraction does not obey ideals. It responds to primitive signals of psychological strength, autonomy, and emotional dominance. And as long as this truth remains hidden, men will keep trying to buy desire with kindness, and women will keep being drawn to what does not ask permission to exist. The game is not fair. It is not beautiful, and it is not gentle. Let's be brutally honest. There is a point almost never said out loud. Attraction is not born from conscious intention. It is born from the unconscious reading of emotional hierarchies. Before any rational thought appears, the mind evaluates who leads the rhythm, who reacts, who explains themselves, who simply acts. The man who reacts too much, who tries to align every move with a woman's mood, communicates psychological subordination. And subordination does not create desire. It creates lukewarm comfort, friendship, predictability. Desire requires friction. It requires risk. It requires the feeling that the other person cannot be fully controlled. Unconscious tests are not moral traps. They are filtering mechanisms. They appear as delays. Sudden tone changes. Silence. Light criticisms disguised as jokes. The goal is not to humiliate. The goal is to observe. And what is observed is not the verbal answer, but inner stability. The good man tries to fix the moment. He apologizes even when he did nothing wrong. He rationalizes. He justifies. Every justification lowers his position. The man who seems cruel, on the other hand, does not enter the game. He does not defend himself against vague accusations. He does not chase approval. He remains whole. This creates an asymmetry the unconscious reads as strength. There is a crucial difference between coldness and indifference. Coldness is control. Indifference is lack of investment. The desired man is not indifferent. He chooses when to invest. That conscious choice creates value. The man who invests all the time, without criteria, makes his investment cheap. What is cheap is not desired, not out of malice, but because of psychic economy. The mind seeks what requires proportional effort. Another ignored element is selective emotional disregard. Not disrespect, not cruelty. Simply not giving excessive importance to everything. The man who is shaken by every fluctuation shows that his balance depends on the other person. That creates one-sided power. Whoever controls the other's emotional state controls the relationship. The cold man keeps his axis even when the relationship oscillates. This does not mean lack of feelings. It means sovereignty over them. There is also the role of internal narrative. Many women grew up hearing they should desire good men, but in practice, they experience that these men, when frustrated, become resentful, demanding, passive-aggressive. The unconscious learns fast. It associates excessive kindness with future emotional debt. The hard man, who does not promise infinite emotional protection, does not create this invisible debt. He does not demand return for what he never offered. Paradoxically, this creates more trust. Perceived cruelty works as a filter. It eliminates those who depend too much on external approval. The man who can tolerate being misunderstood demonstrates something rare. He trusts himself more than he trusts public opinion. This silent self-trust is magnetic because it signals autonomy. Autonomy is the foundation of respect, and without respect, there is no sustainable desire. Only temporary fantasy. There is also the factor of boundaries. The good man often fails to set clear boundaries because he fears looking rigid. He tolerates behaviors he dislikes, hoping his patience will be rewarded. This communicates a lack of self-respect. The man who sets boundaries early may seem cruel, but he communicates something essential. He values himself. And whoever values himself teaches others how they should be treated. Boundaries do not push people away, they organize. Where there is no organization, there is emotional chaos. Desire does not thrive in chaos for long. The human mind also responds to coherence between words and actions. The man who says he is understanding but explodes when frustrated breaks coherence. The man who acts firmly from the beginning maintains consistency. Even if he is seen as harsh, he is predictable in his strength. Predictability of strength is different from predictability of submission. One creates instinctive safety, the other creates boredom. There is a delicate point few want to touch. Many women associate emotional intensity with risk, and risk is exciting. The excessively good man reduces risk to almost zero. He becomes too safe, too early. At this early stage, desire still needs uncertainty. Without it, the flame does not ignite. The mistake is not being good. The mistake is offering stability too soon. Stability is the prize, not the starting currency. Finally, we must dismantle the idea that the cold man always wins. He only wins in the arena of initial attraction. Without awareness, coldness can turn into rigidity, control, or emotional emptiness. But as long as the good man does not learn to hold his strength without asking permission, he will continue to be mistaken for weak. And the unconscious does not negotiate with intentions. It responds to signals. The game follows unwritten rules. Ignoring them does not invalidate them. It only makes the ignorant more vulnerable. Fear of loss is the hidden axis of almost all emotional power dynamics. Whoever fears losing more gives up more control. This applies to relationships, business, war, and every human game. In attraction, this principle operates silently, yet relentlessly. The good man often enters the bond already afraid of losing something he doesn't even possess. He invests prematurely, creates expectations, fantasizes futures. This early investment places him in a vulnerable position. He begins protecting the relationship more than his own emotional integrity, and whoever protects something too much shows he would not survive its loss. The man who seems cruel accepts loss as a real possibility, not as a distant threat, but as a manageable event. He does not build his identity around female approval. That is why, when the relationship fluctuates, he does not panic. This absence of panic is interpreted as strength. The female mind notices. If he can lose and remain whole, then he does not depend. Whoever does not depend chooses. Whoever chooses has power. There is a perverse inversion few perceive. The more a man tries to secure the relationship, the more he signals that he has no options outside it. And the fewer options he appears to have, the lower his perceived value. It does not matter if this is true or not. Attraction responds to perception, not objective reality. The cold man, by trying to secure nothing, creates the illusion of abundance. He may have only one option, but he behaves like someone who needs none. This posture completely shifts the balance. Fear of loss also distorts behavior. The man dominated by this fear begins to act strategically just to avoid conflict. He avoids saying what he really thinks. He swallows discomfort. He negotiates his principles. Every unrequested concession erodes his position. The woman feels it, even if she can't explain it. She is facing a man who abandons himself in order to be accepted, and nobody respects someone who abandons himself. Without respect, desire turns into pity. Routine, or indifference. The man who accepts loss keeps his boundaries even under risk. He prefers conflict over self-erasure. That does not make him aggressive. It makes him whole. Integrity is rare. Rarity creates value. Value creates desire. The equation is simple, but emotionally hard to execute. It requires maturity to endure rejection without turning it into drama, victimhood, or resentment. There is also the emotional mirror effect. A man's inner state is reflected by the woman. If he shows anxiety, she feels anxiety. If he shows fear, she feels insecurity. If he shows calm in uncertainty, she feels stability. The paradox is this. The strongest form of stability comes from not needing to control the outcome. The man who does not try to grip the relationship too tightly allows it to breathe. And where there is space, desire can circulate. Another overlooked point is the difference between attachment and presence. The good man confuses the two. He believes always being available is a sign of care. In practice, it communicates attachment. Attachment is fear in disguise. True presence is conscious choice. It is being there when it makes sense, not when you are afraid of disappearing. The cold man is present when he chooses to be. That choice gives weight to the moment. The man who is always available dilutes his own importance. Fear of loss also creates surveillance behavior. The man starts monitoring signs, interpreting messages, analyzing silences. He gets lost in his mind. The man who accepts loss does not surveil. He observes, but does not fixate. He responds to what happens, not to what he imagines. This difference in posture creates a brutal asymmetry. One lives in the present, the other lives in anticipation of pain. Attraction does not bloom in anticipation of pain. It is born in contact with the present. Here is an uncomfortable truth. Many women only begin to invest emotionally when they sense the man is not guaranteed, when they feel they could lose him. This is not a conscious game. It is an instinctive response. The man who gives himself completely too early removes that possibility. He places himself in the pocket. And what is in the pocket is not chased. Accepting loss does not mean wanting the end. It means not fearing it. That difference redefines the game. The man who does not fear the end does not need to manipulate, please, or hide. He acts naturally. Naturalness is seductive because it is rare in a world of emotional masks. When fear of loss disappears, something changes radically. The man stops negotiating his value. He does not threaten to leave. He also does not beg to stay. He occupies a solid internal space. That space is felt, and what is felt does not need explanation. Tension is the invisible fuel of attraction. Without it, there is no flame. Only habit. The most common mistake of the good man is believing immediate emotional safety creates desire. He confuses peace with attraction, but the human mind does not work like that in the early stage of a relationship. Desire is born from contrast, from controlled uncertainty, from the feeling that something has not yet been conquered. When everything is given too early, there is no space for projection, fantasy, or emotional investment from the other side. Early safety kills curiosity. And without curiosity, desire withers. The man who offers guarantees before they are requested removes mystery. He becomes too readable. The female unconscious prefers to decipher rather than receive ready-made answers. Not because it enjoys suffering, but because the process of discovery activates dopamine. The man who seems cruel keeps layers. He does not reveal himself all at once. He does not turn every meeting into an emotional confession. He preserves zones of silence. Silence creates tension. Tension maintains interest. There is a psychological mechanism rarely discussed. Attraction grows when emotional risk is perceived, but collapses when risk becomes a real threat. The good man removes risk too early. The cold man keeps risk under control. He does not threaten abandonment. But he also does not promise eternal permanence. He occupies the unstable middle ground where desire thrives. This balance requires emotional maturity. Without it, coldness becomes cheap games or empty manipulation. The obsessive need to be chosen is a trap. When a man enters a relationship with the main goal of being chosen, he transfers power. He begins to behave like a candidate, not an agent. Candidates please. Agents decide. Attraction responds to those who decide. The man who places himself under constant evaluation loses spontaneity. Every gesture becomes strategy. Every word becomes a bid for approval. This internal focus is felt, and what is felt as excessive effort loses value. Another brutal point. Desire does not grow where there is total emotional equality from the start. This does not mean permanent hierarchy. It means alternating poles. In the beginning, the one who leads creates attraction. The man who tries to balance everything immediately creates sterile neutrality. The man who leads, even at the risk of seeming harsh, creates direction. Direction is attractive because it reduces ambiguity. Excessive ambiguity creates anxiety. Direction creates excitement. Tension is also born from the ability to disappoint expectations without guilt. The good man feels guilty when he disappoints. He explains. He apologizes for existing outside someone else's script. The cold man disappoints without hostility. He does not turn it into aggression. but he also does not justify himself. This posture communicates autonomy. Autonomy is desirable because it suggests a rich inner world, not dependent on the other. There is also the role of intermittent reward. When attention, affection, and presence are not constant but consistent, the brain values them more. This is not about disappearing or playing childish games. It is about not always being available. Total availability communicates inner scarcity. The man who has a life, purpose, and boundaries is not always accessible. This partial inaccessibility creates healthy tension. The good man, by centering his life around the relationship, removes this dynamic. True security is built later, not first. When built too early, it feels artificial. It feels like an empty promise. The mind becomes suspicious. The cold man does not promise. He builds over time. Each gesture carries weight because it is not automatic. The man who offers everything at the beginning makes his gestures ordinary. What is ordinary is not desired. Here is an uncomfortable truth. Many women only allow themselves to desire fully when they do not feel responsible for the man's emotional state. The good man, by showing fragility too early, creates this responsibility. She begins to restrain herself to avoid hurting him. Where there is restraint, desire is suppressed. The man who holds his own emotional structure frees the other person to desire without guilt. Healthy tension requires tolerating ambiguity without demanding immediate definition. The good man wants labels early. What are we? Where is this going? How do you feel? These questions are not wrong, but when asked from anxiety, they destroy flow. The cold man lets the bond reveal itself. He observes more than he interrogates. Observation is silent power. At the core, the mistake is not wanting security. The mistake is offering security as a strategy for attraction. Attraction does not respond to moral strategies. It responds to primary emotional signals. The man who understands this does not become cruel. He becomes conscious, and consciousness changes everything. Respect always comes before love. Always. This order is ignored because it is uncomfortable. People prefer to believe love creates respect. But love born without respect quickly turns into dependence, possession, or silent contempt. The good man seeks love directly. He wants to be accepted, welcomed, validated. The man who seems cruel seeks internal coherence. He does not ask for love. He demands respect through the way he lives, thinks, and acts. And it is precisely this silent demand that creates the ground where love can grow. Respect is not requested. It is perceived. It is born from congruence between boundaries, words, and actions. The man who changes his principles to please communicates that his principles are not solid, and what is not solid supports nothing. The female mind perceives this quickly, not as a moral judgment, but as a structural reading. If he does not respect himself, why would he be respected? And without respect, desire moves elsewhere or slowly fades. There is a fatal mistake many men make, trying to negotiate respect through sacrifice. They believe the more they do, the more they will be valued. The effect is the opposite. Unrequested sacrifice creates emotional debt. Debt creates guilt. Guilt corrodes desire. No one desires someone who makes them feel guilty for not giving back at the same intensity. The cold man does not sacrifice without choice. He offers when he wants, not when he fears losing. Respect is also linked to predictability of character, not behavior. The good man tries to be predictable in everything. Schedules, replies, emotions. This creates monotony. The firm man is predictable in only one thing. He does not betray himself. This predictability of character creates deep safety. Even if his actions vary, his core remains stable. The mind respects this, and where there is respect, desire finds ground to grow. Another ignored point: the relationship between respect and emotional authority. Authority is not control over others. It is mastery over oneself. The man who becomes easily dysregulated loses authority. He may be kind, but his kindness feels fragile. The man who maintains self-control, even under tension, transmits silent authority. This authority is mistaken for cruelty because it does not explain itself, does not justify itself, and does not apologize for existing. There is also the matter of admiration. Love without admiration becomes attachment. Admiration is born when the other represents something you do not fully possess. The good man tries to be equal, leveled, mirrored. The man who seems cruel maintains symbolic distance. He does not dissolve into the relationship, he remains himself. This continuity generates admiration because it signals strong identity. Without identity, there is nothing to admire. Many relationships fail because the man tries to be emotionally accessible too early. He exposes deep insecurities before building respect. This reverses the order. Vulnerability without foundation becomes weight. Vulnerability with foundation becomes intimacy. The cold man builds foundation first. He does not open up from neediness. He opens up by choice. That difference changes everything. Respect also appears in the ability to say no without aggression. The good man fears no. He associates boundaries with loss. The firm man understands that boundaries organize the bond. When he says no, he does not over-explain. He does not apologize for having a position. This behavior draws a clear line. Here is someone who takes himself seriously. The mind respects that automatically. There is also respect born from healthy emotional unpredictability. Not knowing exactly how to please someone creates effort from the other side. The good man does all the effort alone. The cold man distributes effort. The woman begins to invest, to understand, to conquer, to maintain. Investment creates attachment. Attachment, when balanced, creates ongoing desire. The problem is not kindness. The problem is kindness without structure. Kindness without structure becomes submission. Submission generates unconscious contempt. The man who learns to be firm without being hostile, distant without being absent, accessible without being needy, completely changes his position in the emotional game. Apparent cruelty is often confused with masculinity, because on the surface, both share similar external signals: silence, firmness, emotional economy, resistance to pressure. The mistake is copying the signals without understanding the internal structure that sustains them. Psychological masculinity is not gratuitous hardness. It is the ability to remain whole under tension. Empty cruelty is just poorly disguised defense. The female mind distinguishes, even if it cannot verbalize, when there is a center and when there is a mask. Culturally, men were taught that sensitivity is virtue and that strength is suspicious. The result is a generation trying to be accepted through moral approval. But attraction is not an ethical referendum. It responds to internal coherence. The man who tries to look tough without emotional grounding contradicts himself in the details. He exaggerates silence, uses indifference as performance, confuses boundaries with hostility. This caricature does not sustain desire. It sustains short conflicts and unstable relationships. Functional masculinity is born from emotional self-sufficiency. This does not mean isolation. It means independence. The man who needs to be understood all the time loses traction. The man who understands himself first creates clarity around him. This clarity is mistaken for coldness because it does not ask permission. It occupies space. And occupying space is a political act in the emotional arena. Whoever does not occupy yields. There is an implicit learning mechanism. Repeated experiences shape preferences. Many women associate good men with broken promises, emotional dependency, and future demands. They associate firm men with predictability of character, even with flaws. The unconscious prefers predictable flaws over unstable promises. Hence the confusion. Firmness is read as cruelty because it does not bend to immediate comfort. Another crucial point is conflict management. The man who avoids conflict at all costs communicates inability to sustain friction. Relationships require friction. The firm man enters conflict without escalating or fleeing. He does not dramatize. He does not threaten. He does not beg. He holds tension. Holding tension is a rare skill. Rarity creates value. Value creates desire. Apparent cruelty is often just the willingness not to anesthetize conflict with empty niceness. There is also the theme of bodily congruence. The body communicates before words: posture, pace, eye contact, pauses. The man who tries to look tough without bodily congruence feels false. The centered man slows the environment down. He does not compete for attention. He receives it. This slowdown is interpreted as dominance. Not dominance over others, but dominance over his own nervous system. And the calm nervous system leads. Imitating tough behavior without internal structure leads to failure, because the mask gets tired and the mask leaks. Under pressure, the actor reveals the fear he tried to hide. Authentic masculinity does not need to prove anything. It does not show off. It decides when to approach, when to step back, when to speak, when to stay silent. These decisions build patterns. Patterns build trust. Trust sustains desire over time. There is also confusion between assertiveness and aggressiveness. Assertiveness is clarity without violence. Aggressiveness is energy without direction. The good man avoids assertiveness for fear of seeming aggressive. The immature man embraces aggressiveness for fear of seeming weak. The solid man chooses assertiveness. He says what he is, what he wants, and what he does not accept. No spectacle, no apology for existing. The masculinity that attracts is not the one that humiliates. It is the one that does not humiliate itself. Not the one that controls, but the one that is not controlled by fear. Not the one that imposes, but the one that sustains. This subtlety is lost when everything is reduced to the simplistic idea of being cruel. Cruelty is a label placed by those who expect concession and meet a boundary. There is a hidden cycle that governs many relationships and is almost never recognized while it is happening. It begins with attraction, moves into unequal investment, advances into accommodation, and ends in silent contempt. The turning point almost always happens when the man tries to hold what he should only sustain. Holding is fear. Sustaining is presence. The difference between the two defines whether desire remains alive or rots. In the beginning, the firm man attracts because he does not need. He does not revolve his life around the woman. He includes her. He does not place her at the center. This creates curiosity, effort from the other side, gradual investment. The problem arises after conquest, when he changes position. When he begins to fear losing what he conquered, he starts holding. His behavior subtly shifts. More messages, more explanations, more emotional monitoring. The woman perceives the change before she can name it. The axis has shifted. This shift activates an unconscious loss of respect. Not because the man became bad, but because he stopped being who he was. Initial attraction was not to the anxious caretaker role. It was to stability without dependence. When that stability disappears, desire loses ground. Contempt is not born from hatred. It is born from instinctive disappointment. The mind realizes that what seemed solid was not. Contempt rarely appears as open aggression. It shows up as impatience, irony, distance, lower tolerance. Small comments gain weight. The man feels something changed, but tries to fix it by offering more of what no longer works. This is the final mistake. The more he offers out of fear, the faster he accelerates the process. Contempt grows where there is insistence without emotional authority. There is a cruel paradox in this cycle. The man who wins the woman can lose her at the moment he tries to emotionally possess her. Possession here does not mean control. It means dependence. Emotional dependence turns the relationship into a burden. Desire does not coexist with the feeling of being responsible for another person's psychological balance. When a woman feels she has to walk on eggshells, desire retreats. Another rarely discussed point. Contempt appears when a woman realizes that the man would not leave even if he were mistreated, not because she wants to mistreat him, but because this reveals lack of self-respect. If he accepts everything, his symbolic value drops. The man who does not accept disrespect, even if it costs the relationship, maintains his position. The man who accepts in order not to lose, loses anyway, just slowly. The cycle completes when the man tries to rescue initial attraction with promises, declarations, and concessions. He tries to revive the beginning by offering emotional intensity. But the beginning was not emotionally intense. It was stable. It was the absence of need that created space. By trying to recreate attraction through the opposite path, he reinforces the perception of weakness. Contempt solidifies. There is also the effect of polarity. Inversion. In the beginning, the woman invests more emotionally because she senses risk. When the man begins to invest more, the poles invert. Whoever invests more loses power. Emotional power is not domination. It is freedom of choice. Whoever needs more chooses less. Desire follows the one who chooses. Many men confuse consistency with insistence. Consistency is coherence over time. Insistence is repetition driven by fear. The first builds trust. The second builds exhaustion. The solid man is consistent without being insistent. He remains who he is, regardless of immediate response. The insecure man insists because he is trying to control the outcome. The hidden cycle almost always ends with a distorted narrative. She changed. She became cold. She doesn't value good men. These stories ease pain, but they block learning. The real change happened in the axis of emotional power. When the man stopped sustaining himself and started clinging, desire lost oxygen. None of this is conscious. There are no clear villains, only dynamics. Dynamics do not respect intentions. They respond to behavior, and behavior is born from internal states. The final mistake that must be exposed is simple and devastating. It is not kindness that destroys attraction. It is kindness motivated by fear. When kindness is born from fear of losing, fear of rejection, fear of not being enough,